Welcome to the Living Out podcast, helping people, churches and society talk about faith and sexuality.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever it is for you, wherever you are listening to this Living Out podcast. We're in season or series 13, episode 4. And if you've been listening to this series so far, you know that it's all focused in on the recently published book, The Intimacy Deficit by local author Ed Shaw. If we haven't met yet, I'm the very same Ed Shaw, and in this series of the Living Out podcast, I'm in conversation with others about the content of my book, The Intimacy Deficit, published by IVP here in the UK and available from all good bookshops or online retailers. Today, we're talking about intimacy with others, having already had a conversation about intimacy with God and intimacy with yourself with some other friends. But before we talk about intimacy with others, before we explore this part of the book, it's time to introduce the other occupants of this virtual podcast recording studio. And guest number one is a increasingly familiar voice to Living Out podcast listeners, our very own Joe Arkle, who rejoices in the title of engagement lead at Living Out. Hello, Joe. Do you want to explain what you do? What does it mean to be an engagement lead?
Hello, Ed. First of all, I'd like to correct you that my name is Joe Arkle, not Joe Arkle. Just in case anybody comes up to me in the street and addresses me as Arkle, that would be seriously in trouble. Engagement lead. My job at Living Out is really to help people who don't yet know about Living Out to know about them. I think I consistently, wherever I go, tell people I work for this little charity called Living Out. Have you heard of it? And they say no. And part of my heart sinks, but then part of me rejoices because I think, well, let me tell you about it. So that's my job, to spread the word about Living Out and help people be more engaged with what we do.
Brilliant. Joe, I'm not even going to try and pronounce your surname now or in any other context because I feel so quickly rebuked. Guest number two has appeared before on this podcast, having written for the website, and I think I can pronounce his surname with real confidence. Jez Field, very good to see you. Do you want to introduce yourself, where you're coming from, who you are?
Hello, Ed, great, and Joe, great to be here. And well done, actually. Most people give me an S at the end of Field, so well done. You got my surname correct. I'm a pastor and a dad of 3, and I live in Seaford on the south coast of England.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And this is probably quite a moment to sort of celebrate in the Living Out podcast, in the sense that this is the first time that same-sex attracted people have been outnumbered by heterosexual people on the podcast. I don't think this has ever happened before.
It's a whole new experience.
This is a whole new experience and showing that Living Out really is for everyone. Right. Well, we're talking about intimacy with others, and I'd love to ask you, when you know someone is going to be a good friend, because obviously intimacy with others in terms of the intimacy deficit is not marriage, it's intimacy with others in the sort of in the wonderful gift, or enjoying the wonderful gift of friendship. When do you tend to know somebody is going to be a good friend? What makes you think that, feel that? What's the sort of clue for you that the person you'd perhaps just met for the very first time is going to be a good friend? Joe, are there anything that sort of shows you that that's going to be the case?
Well, I don't want to be flippant about friendship and intimacy right at the beginning, but for me, it's always the banter. I know somebody is going to be a good friend if I can insult them and they just take it in their stride. I don't know if it's because I'm a northerner. It can be a little bit of a risky strategy. I wouldn't even say it is a strategy. It's just who I am. The banter comes out and then I have to judge by the person's face on whether it was okay or not. And I do spend quite a lot of my time apologising.
Banter would be the thing for me as well, actually. Interesting. I love it when somebody teases me and I think, yeah, you're going to be a good friend. What about you, Jez?
Oh, well, that's good to know, Ed. If I suddenly take the mick out of you, that's going to go down well. That's all right. I wrote down humour as well. And when I saw that question, because I think it's such an easy glue. I think beyond humour, I put curiosity. If I talk to someone and I think there's a degree of just inquisitiveness in them about the world, I think, oh yeah, I like this. Okay, I'll chase up these ideas and we'll have an interesting conversation about things. So that, and if I was to add one more, it would be a degree of honesty or vulnerability. You know, when you get beyond trying to impress one another, and as a true Brit, if someone's willing to complain about something with me, then you know we're going to be lifelong friends. Let's just criticise something and we'll be off to a good start.
I love that. And it's really important, isn't it? Because I think banter is probably quite an English thing. And banter can be a thing that pushes vulnerability away. But a combination of banter, curiosity, vulnerability, all great things when it comes to intimacy with others. Thanks for getting us started. To my guests, Joe and Jez. Okay, well, Joe, Jez, why did you read The Intimacy Deficit? And in particular, what did you like about it? Is there anything that frustrated you about it? Jez, you've actually written a review for Living Out on The Intimacy Deficit. So tell us, summarise that for us a little bit briefly to give it a bit of a spoiler for your book review.
Summarise the book for it. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant, and I have given it away to people. We've sold copies of it. I'm doing a sermon series in my church at the moment. In fact, just yesterday I preached on intimacy with others. So this is a well-timed chat to be having. I loved it. I read it because Andrew Bunt thought I'd enjoy it, and he was right. I really, thought it was brilliant. So thank you, Ed, for writing it. And if people haven't read it yet, they do need to get out and buy it.
Oh, that's very kind, and it's very lovely to read your review, and it's fantastic to hear how you're using it in a local context. Joe, why did you read the book?
Why did I read it? Because you said to me, Joe, can you read this? And I always do what you tell me to do. What did I like about it? Without wanting to sound rude, I did like that it was short. And it's not because I don't want to read a big tome from you, Ed, but I just think that short, accessible books are the future and the way to go. And I think the other thing that I really liked was something that I've seen other people pick up on is that it came out of your actual real relationships with people. So it's been written from your own experience, your own sort of observations from life, your own observations from your friendships and those people that you're investing in, and that's what gave it a sort of authenticity, I think.
Great. Oh, that's again lovely to hear, and thank you very much for obeying me in that area, if not in every area of life. Okay, how would we explain intimacy with others? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Any sort of personal stories, or just ways of which you'd perhaps explain what this part of the book's all about, Jez?
Yeah, I think it looks like an unhurriedness, not just in time, but in our soul, like being at peace, like resting in someone's company, when you kind of are able to just forget about yourself and not actually concerned about how you're being presented to them at this time, because there's an acceptance at the heart of the relationship. And I think, you know. The degree to which you're intimate with someone, I think, is the degree to which you're happy to sit in silence in their company at times. So that's a big part of it, I think. And how you feel about sometimes physical contact with that person, particularly as a guy. I think if I've got a good male friend and we're happy to occasionally just hug or lean against each other on a sofa, you think, there's an intimacy there that's unspoken, but that I think goes a long way to communicate what it is. It's an unhurried restfulness in one another's restfulness in one another's company.
I love that definition, particularly for somebody who's not very good at silence. I think one of the highest compliments I can pay somebody is not to insist on talking all the time. And I've just been away with two friends, and I think actually that's one of the things we're able to do together that helps me just really get a sense of the fact that we are really good friends, is that we can be silent in each other's company. It's a really nice way of putting it. I love that. What about for you, Joe? How would you sort of explain this, develop this?
I think intimacy for me is being known by somebody and being understood. And I was in the pub last night with my friend Morag. She and I have been friends for 20 years. We've probably met up most weeks to talk about life and the things that are hard and to pray. More than happy now. At the beginning, probably the 20 years, less comfortable about praying in the pub with our eyes closed, but now we don't really care. We just go for it. And I think, she has a little phrase that she sometimes writes these nice cards to me and just says, it's so good doing life with you. And that's what it feels like, is we are companions, we can be open with each other. I know if I've got something I need to talk to her about, she's a safe space for that. And she knows me so well that probably about a year ago we were in church and I went downstairs because I was close to tears, and there was a knock on the toilet door and she was like, "You all right, mate?" And I was thinking, how does she know that I didn't just need the toilet? This is a friend who knows me very well. So yeah, I think being known and feeling like somebody can be a safe place for you to open up when things are hard.
Okay, if that's what intimacy with others is, and it's lovely to have those examples and stories that actually, away from, you're both married people, but you haven't been talking about your husband or your wife, been talking about friends, which is great, really encouraging to hear the sort of definitions of intimacy spreading away from just married relationships. And what have been the blockers to intimacy with others? What are the things that have stopped you from enjoying this gift from God? Joe, what are the things that have stopped you?
Yeah, it was really good to reflect on this question, actually, because I think it's something that I have talked with friends about over the years, and that is a kind of unrealistic, imaginary comparison with others. And by that, I mean, those thoughts can pop into your head, no one else struggles with this. You're the worst of all Christians. Everyone else is managing their life well. And I think we probably all have those thoughts at times, and we have a decision to make about whether we let those thoughts grow and fester, and whether we sort of indulge them a bit. And if we do find ourselves in that place, that can grow into real shame, and shame is the thing that makes you hide away from others, and so you don't want to open up. And so I think just catching those thoughts, recognizing that actually no, everybody struggles with different things, but everybody struggles, and not allowing that idea that you're the only one, or you're the worst Christian, to be something that prevents you from connecting with others and opening up.
It's really, I'm reading a book on intimacy, actually published in the States earlier this year from a Christian author there, and she says that shame is basically the number one blocker to intimacy. And she's really, really helpful in what I'm reading about that there. What about for you, Jez? What are the blockers? What have been the blockers to intimacy with others in your life?
Yeah, I think you list 7 in the book, and I think I resonated with almost all of them. It's hard to get past fear, to be honest, when in terms of, because there seems to kind of intertwine so many of them. The reason I am so busy for people is because I'm afraid. The reason I try to impress people is because I'm afraid. So it links them together. So I think that willingness to, it's interesting. I think I'm an extrovert. I love being with people, and I'm curious. I love talking to other people, and I love finding out about other people. And my wife picks me up on this often, because she notices that I rarely disclose things about myself. And I love finding out about information about other people, sometimes as a tactic for not having to share stuff about myself, partly because there's a large part of there's a voice in my mind that just says, they don't care about you. You don't need to share anything about you. So it's the fear, like you said, shame, or just insecurity generally. It's like, you're not important. Don't go on about yourself all the time. Because again, we all know, we talk to those people who just talk about themselves all the time. So I think an overreaction to those kinds of people means that sometimes we don't share anything about ourselves because I don't want to be that kind of person. And so perhaps a blocker might be, along with fear, like overreacting to negative examples that we've come across, where we're trying to learn what it means to be a social creature. And we learn that partly by looking at the negative examples around us and going, okay, don't be like them, and eventually have all of that kind of complexity in your head going, it's really hard just to be with someone without overthinking this all the time.
And can I just pick up at actually this stage on that, because you're a church leader, Jez, and one of the things that church leaders do is ask people how they are. We're caring for people, and so there can be that sense in church leadership that it's almost, well, perhaps not wrong, but certainly inappropriate to share too much of yourself. And a lot of people talk against church leaders having friends in their own church family. One of the more controversial, or certainly one of the things that people have asked me most about the book is about me saying that actually church leaders need friends, and it's really important that they have two-way friendships. And if they don't, they're perhaps not suited to church ministry. What do you make of all that, just building on what you said?
Yeah, I think it's a really important statement that you threw out there in your book. I think it's very provocative, deliberately so. I think one of the requirements for church leadership is you've got to be well thought of by outsiders, the Apostle Paul says, which actually means you've got to have relationships with people outside your church. And to be, well thought of, I think it doesn't really just mean like keeping up a good image of what a Christian should look like. It means being integrated in your community, and I think you do that. The only way you get thoroughly integrated into a place is through degrees of vulnerability back and forth until you eventually become closer to someone. And so I think it's incredibly important. But I'm also completely aware of the dynamic, isn't it? I mean, I don't think it's unique, of course, to church leadership, but just any position of leadership, you're the one setting the agenda all the time. And so it does feel like it's a little bit self-indulgent if you're then sharing about yourself all the time, because you think, I don't want to do that again. But leaders do set the culture and tone of the place or, thing that their business or organisation they're leading. And so you do need to be willing to be vulnerable, honest, transparent with people, and that doesn't just mean when you've made a mistake. And I think if you've got that characteristic in your life generally, it will show itself in the fact that you can relate to people outside of the workplace and you have friendships. So I do think it's really important for a church leader's emotional relational health. And I do think if a church leader is listening to this and they think, I don't actually have any friends, it's not to feel ashamed about that. It's just to realise you need to do some work on this, because it's important that you get involved in your community.
Joe, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about and reflecting on the fact that our pastor is great and he works so hard. He's really busy, but he always prioritises the quiz at his local pub on a Sunday night. And I love that about him, because I feel like, not only is it important for him, but it is an example, like Jez was saying, you're an example to others. And, that means that, when it comes to the carol service, he has got people to invite, his neighbours and people from down the pub, which I guess, is a challenge for church leaders, sometimes just so immersed in a Christian world that, like, where are those people that you're personally getting to share the gospel with in your own life?
And also just really good for church leaders to have. I mean, I think I always want to have people who are genuinely my friends in my church family, but also, friends outside. And you need a real mixture. I think we all need a mixture of different sorts of friendships from different contexts if we are to enjoy intimacy with others in all its fullness.
You're listening to the Living Out podcast, helping people, churches and society talk about faith and sexuality. For more stories, resources and events, visit our website at livingout.org.
Okay, so we've thought about some of the things that stop intimacy from developing in our lives, intimacy with others. What have been the real catalysts for us? We've perhaps hinted at some of these already, but what have been the real catalysts for intimacy with others for you, Jez?
Weakness, trying to live pure as a Christian is going to require anyone who wants to do that to look outside of themselves for help, because we can't do it. And I was thinking about this recently when it comes to addictions that people face and challenges. No one can overcome kind of what we might call besetting sins or just habitual problems on their own. And that's hard, makes it hard. But the good side of that is it forces you to be with people. It forces you to experience vulnerability and reach out. And so I think in my own life, early on into my Christian life, I realised the need for good accountability relationships, whatever we call it. And so that forced a degree of vulnerability that I think then led to greater degrees of friendship and intimacy with other people that I hope to kind of carried on to this day. But I think weakness is a big one.
And how did you start those conversations? How did you break through? You mentioned earlier fear, and we all have fear of sharing our weaknesses. We have fear of being vulnerable. What really sort of forced you through that pain barrier? That's
a good question. I think Jesus is quite hard against hypocrisy. And I think you read that as a new Christian, reading that going, I don't want to wear a mask. Okay, I can't wear a mask. I'm going to have to take a mask off to someone at some point and let them know. And then, realising that, realising the benefit of that. I think once you do that and you're met with a degree of acceptance and unconditional love and not judgment, that makes you realise, this is really good for me. I need this. And I think there is always going to be a pain barrier, and it grows back again when you're not regularly making yourself vulnerable. You do have to keep trying to take off those scales, because the dragon grows again. for recalling Eustace there from Narnia. I think there's that kind of, there is a deliberate action that needs to happen, because you realise that the danger of not peeling this scale off, the danger of not doing this is A, it's going to turn me into a hypocrite, which I know Jesus rails against, but B, it's going to separate me from Christ, and I really want to know Christ, and I don't want to end up away from him in this kind of quagmire of just being entrenched in sin. It's bad for me. I don't like it.
Oh, thank you. And really, really helpful. And actually really helpful particularly to see, because I think I've gone through stages where I have been really open, honest and vulnerable with people. But yes, just that analogy from Narnia Voyage of the Dawn Treader, isn't it? Of the scales growing back, I think is really, really timely, because it's very easy, isn't it, to have little bursts of vulnerability and honesty, but then actually to get out of that really good habit. Oh, Joe, what have been the catalysts for intimacy with others in your life?
Yeah, I would probably say similar, just the openness and vulnerability. And I think probably, going against the risk of sort of getting out of doing it, I think is having just regular commitments in the diary with people. So, if you've got a prayer partner or an accountability group, you're meeting with them regularly. And sometimes things happen in life and it, people move away, or that, that has to stop, and just making sure that you're going to put that back in place. And I think, taking a risk. But I also think it is something you can practice, isn't it? And it feels like it gets easier. I think my husband called me the other day an oversharer. So I'm not going to argue against that. I definitely am somebody who, I'm here for those deep chats. I find it so hard to sort of do chit chat. I want to get straight into the good stuff. I probably am somebody that it would come more naturally to me to be open. But then you reap the rich rewards of that, I think. I was in church some weeks back, and the pastor was preaching on the raising of Lazarus, and there was something in it that just really touched me, and God sort of pointed out this thing in my life that needed to change. And there I was, like, crying in church, which is also again quite normal for me, just generally crying all the time. And I wanted to pray, with somebody afterwards, just to really sort of, in obedience to God, accepting that thing that he was saying to me. And all of my go-to girlfriends weren't there, they were all away, and I was sort of looking around thinking, who am I going to ask? Who am I going to share this with? And I just sort of sidled up to this lady, on the other side of the church, who I know a bit, and just told her what was going on and asked her to pray for me. And we just had this really beautiful time of, honest chat and prayer. And, the relationship has changed because of that. She's shared some things with me. We're not like best friends now, but, the relationship is deeper. And I think you sort of open the door a little bit to see if people are going to meet you. And when they do, it's just so rewarding that then I feel like, oh, I want to do that more.
Okay, we've been using a lot of language, haven't we, around honesty and openness, and we've been talking about emotion. These aren't things that are traditionally associated with, just stereotypes of what it is to be a man, masculinity today. And there might be some men listening who are thinking, that's okay for you, Joe. You're a woman. But men, real men, just don't. This isn't us. We don't do intimacy. We don't really need intimacy in the same way. Any responses, Jez, Joe, to anybody that's sort of perhaps giving that pushback in their mind at the moment?
Well, one book that I found really helpful, I read it a year ago, by Max Dickens, a book called Billy No Mates. It's not a Christian book, but it's about male loneliness and male friendship. And it was really, really helpful. And one of the things he says in there is that friendship always requires leadership. A lot of men can get on board with that idea. I'll be a leader. And I think there is a requirement in any friendship, if you want it to grow, for leadership to occur. And men, therefore, need to lead in their friendships, the friendship in a direction that they want it to go. And men need intimacy. They need honest conversation. And where it takes place for men is often different. I think my observation in church groups and who signs up for them is just anecdotal evidence. Like, women are drawn to some kinds of size groups and men maybe to others. I don't know, generally speaking. But I think if a man wants deeper intimacy with his friends, he needs to lead the friendship in that direction, which often is going to require him to go first in taking off a mask, in inviting some vulnerability and pushing through some of the barriers. That's the first thing that comes to my mind anyway.
And I think also just different activities. I've heard it said, and again, this is investing in stereotypes, gender stereotypes, which we often discourage at Living Out, but they're there for a reason, that the men are much better at opening up in an activity where you can basically walk along. You don't have to look each other in the eye. So, a walk with a guy can be much more, or a drive with a guy can be much more fruitful rather than sitting opposite each other, where there's actually eye contact. And I certainly found some of my most intimate conversations with other men have been when we've been on a walk or when we've been on a long car drive. I'm told that golf is really good for intimate conversations, though, the fact that I can't play golf would stop me there. But, just those sort of activities, often the context for breaking through to intimacy for men. Brilliant. Joe, what would you add to this? You've got a number of men in your life.
I do. I have 4 sons that are now at various stages of almost being men. And I think probably, the fact that I'm a bit of an oversharer does mean we have a culture in our house of talking about how we're doing. And some of them find that easier to do than others. I have definitely heard people say to me, yeah, men just don't need friends in the same way as women do. And I think, perhaps I've sort of bought that line for a little while. But I think, the truth is that men do need that. And looking at things like suicide rates among young men, highlight the fact that actually isolation and loneliness is a serious issue for men. And the other thing I wonder is whether, having done some work with some couples, that for men and women in marriage, sometimes for men there's that pressure that they need to be the one who is always okay, like they're the one who's going to have the answers. And not only perhaps a societal pressure or pressure they put on themselves, but sometimes a pressure that the women put on them as well, like I need you to be okay because I'm depending on you, when actually our job for each of us is to depend upon the Lord. And that it can be a bit of a trap in marriage, that women sort of look to the husband as the sort of backstop when actually that's God's job. It's not really for the man to live up to that.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, statistically they say that 1 in 5 men don't have a close friend, or don't have anyone they call a close friend. So it's pretty high. We know that loneliness is the starting gun of many other health disorders. And so there is a real crisis, and that's why it's often, we're aware, aren't we, that when a marriage breaks down, or if a wife dies first, the man often, tragically, will follow shortly after. Or in times of divorce, men will just spiral because a man's world will increasingly just shrink and shrink and shrink, so his only friend is his spouse. I mean, if she leaves or they separate, then it just makes life harder for them. So I do think there's something that's a really important subject and topic, and so I was really glad that we were going to talk about this one. And I think part of what you do in your book's really good. You model a healthy vulnerability as a man with your various challenges throughout the book that you kind of pepper examples.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just think I wonder whether men are better at appearing to survive without friends, but don't really thrive without friends. And I just wonder whether that's it. Although, sadly, it's the suicide rate showed that's not always the case. But I do want to say to a lot of men who push back against this, to say actually, you could thrive more in life if you had more friends. And actually, your marriage, your family life would benefit so much from you having other friends as well. I have other questions I would love to ask you, but we're basically out of time, which is a real shame. But thank you so much for being part of this conversation, to both Jez and to Joe. And I hope this sparks you, listener, to have conversations with your friends, to perhaps sort of be vulnerable, to perhaps get them listening to this podcast too, and then discuss it so that you can grow the depth of your friendship. You might even want to buy a friend a copy of The Intimacy Deficit, with some paragraphs underlined. Who knows? That would perhaps be a little bit passive aggressive, but certainly buy them the book and discuss these chapters in particular if you think that would help you develop your intimacy with others. Thank you again, to Jez and to Joe for joining us. We've mentioned various resources that will be in the show notes. Thank you, listener, for listening. It's always good to have you here. If you do enjoy this podcast, please do rate it and do share it, as I've just mentioned, with other people who you think might benefit from being involved in this sort of conversation. Our next episode, the final episode in this series on the intimacy deficit, is going to be focusing in on intimacy with creation, and we're going to be joined by Andy Robinson and the founder of the Living Out podcast, Anne Whitten, back as a special guest next time. But for now, goodbye. Thank you so much for joining us on the Living Out podcast.